At exactly 7:03 a.m., Karen Whitmore stood on my porch demanding I get rid of that dangerous animal, while my German Shepherd Rex sat in perfect position wearing his Federal Service dog vest. She had her phone out, animal control already on speed dial. "I don't care what fake vest you bought online," she sneered, waving her clipboard like a sword. "German Shepherds are banned under HOA Covenant 47C. You have 1 hour to remove that beast, or I'm having it seized as contraband. Rex, trained by the U.S. Army to detect IEDs and save soldiers' lives, didn't even blink. But I felt my blood pressure spike. This woman was about to learn the difference between HOA rules and federal law the hard way. See, Karen thought she was dealing with just another neighbor she could bully into submission. She had no clue that Rex isn't just my pet, he's my prescribed medical equipment, protected under federal statute. Threatening to seize him was like threatening to confiscate someone's wheelchair. The smell of Karen's sickeningly sweet perfume mixed with the morning dew made my stomach turn. Or maybe that was just the rage building up as I realized this woman was about to put me through hell. She had picked the wrong veteran to mess with. What would you do if your HOA Karen tried to steal your service dog? And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. My name is Devin Torres, 52 years old, and I thought the wars were behind me when I left Afghanistan 3 years ago. Turns out, I just traded one battlefield for another, suburban Colorado Springs, where the enemy wears pearls and wields clipboards instead of RPGs. I'm a retired Army combat engineer, 3 tours overseas, 26 years of service, until an IED blast in Kandahar left me with more than just physical scars. The invisible wounds, PTSD, anxiety attacks that hit like freight trains, those are the ones that nearly killed me after I came home. That's where Rex saved my life. This 4-year-old German Shepherd isn't my pet, he's my prescribed medical equipment. When panic attacks hit, Rex performs deep pressure therapy, his 70-pound frame pressing against my chest until my breathing steadies. When crowds overwhelm me, he creates space. When nightmares jolt me awake at 3 a.m., he's already there, warm and solid against my side. I bought 1247 Maplewood Drive 18 months ago specifically for Rex. Half-acre lot, 6-foot privacy fence, quiet cul-de-sac where a working dog could do his job. The house itself? Nothing special. Beige vinyl siding, builder-grade everything, but it had what we needed. The neighborhood smelled like fresh mulch and sprinkler systems when we moved in. Kids on bikes, parents waving from driveways, American flags on porches. It felt like the dream I'd fought to protect overseas. Then I met Karen Whitmore, and that dream became a nightmare. Karen owned the corner house with the golf course lawn and flower beds so perfect they looked fake. At 58, she'd been HOA president for 6 years, treating Maplewood Estates like her personal kingdom. She measured neighbors by property values and found most people lacking. Our first encounter came during Rex's worst night since we'd moved in. Thunderstorms trigger his protective instincts, leftover wiring from Afghanistan where bad weather meant incoming mortars. His urgent barking at 2 a.m. sent my PTSD into overdrive. Chest tight, hands shaking, walls closing in. Rex immediately switched to medical mode, pressing his bulk against my legs, guiding me to the couch for pressure therapy. The barking stopped once he registered my distress. My well-being became his priority. 20 minutes later, Karen appeared at my door in a silk robe, every hair in place despite the early hour. The sickly sweet smell of her rose perfume mixed with cold night air made my stomach turn. "That dog woke up half the neighborhood," she announced. "Maplewood has noise ordinances." I explained Rex was a service dog, that I'd had a medical episode. Karen's expression never changed, like I was speaking a foreign language. "Emotional support animals don't have special rights," she said, snapping photos of Rex through my screen door. "I'm filing an HOA complaint. Disruptive animals are community problems." The next morning brought my introduction to Karen's bureaucratic warfare. Violation notice number 1 slipped under my door while I walked Rex. "Prohibited dog breed violation," it read in official HOA letterhead. "German Shepherds classified as aggressive breeds, banned per Covenant 47C, March 2019 amendment. 30 days to rehome animal or face $50 daily fines." My hands shook, not from panic this time, but rage. She'd watched me explain Rex's service dog status, seen his vest, heard about my medical crisis. None of it mattered. Rules were rules. Neighbors Stella Rodriguez and Frank Patterson witnessed the whole confrontation. Stella, a night nurse heading home from Memorial Hospital, and Frank, a retired firefighter walking his ancient beagle, both looked worried when I showed them the notice. "She's done this before," Frank whispered, checking for Karen's listening ears. 3 families, 2 years. Different violations, same result. They move or go broke fighting. "Why doesn't anyone stop her?" I asked. Frank's answer chilled me. "Because Karen destroys anyone who crosses her." As they left, I stood holding that violation notice, Rex steady beside me. The morning sun warmed my face, but inside, ice-cold calculation was setting in. Karen thought she'd found another victim to bully into submission. She was about to discover that some veterans don't retreat, and federal law trumps HOA rules every single time. 3 days after Karen's violation notice, I came home from my VA appointment to find a certified letter that made my hands shake. Not from PTSD this time, but pure rage. Thick envelope. Law firm letterhead reading Whitmore & Associates Legal Services, the kind of mail that ruins your whole week. Inside was Karen's nuclear option. A $10,000 lawsuit threat for willful violation of community standards. The legal jargon was thick enough to choke on, clearly designed to terrify someone into submission. But what really set me off were the attached photographs. Detailed shots of Rex in our fenced backyard, drinking water, lying in shade, playing fetch. Someone had been trespassing on my property to build a case against my service dog. Each photo was labeled with timestamps and GPS coordinates like evidence from a murder scene. The smell of the paper, that expensive legal letterhead scent, mixed with my rising anger made me feel sick. The letter demanded I appear before the HOA board for a disciplinary hearing within 7 days or face immediate emergency injunction procedures. Karen was escalating to full legal warfare over a federal service dog she had no authority to touch. Rex sensed my stress spiking and immediately pressed against my leg, his 70 pounds of calm steadying my breathing. Even furious, I noticed how perfectly his training worked. Responses drilled into him during our time overseas when staying calm meant staying alive. But this time, instead of just managing the panic, I decided to fight back with facts. The next morning found me at the El Paso County Recorder's office, a government building that smelled like copy toner and stale coffee. The clerk, Mrs. Henderson, helped me dig through every HOA document dating back to 2015. I remembered reading somewhere that retroactive rule changes needed homeowner consent. Time to find out if that was true. 4 hours later, buried in a stack of amendments, I struck gold. Karen's aggressive breed restriction, Amendment 47C, wasn't added until March 15, 2019. I closed on my house in July 2018, 8 months earlier. My purchase contract explicitly grandfathered me under the 2018 rules, which had 0 breed restrictions. The taste of victory was sweeter than the stale vending machine coffee I'd been drinking all morning. I called real estate attorney Sarah Kim, who confirmed my discovery. Existing homeowners can't be forced to follow new rules they never agreed to in writing. Karen's entire case just crumbled, but she wasn't giving up that easily. The next afternoon, she appeared at my door with Animal Control Officer Rodriguez, a tired-looking man who clearly didn't want to be there. The sound of his heavy boots on my porch mixed with Karen's triumphant clicking heels. She thought she'd found a new angle of attack. "Sir, I need to see documentation for this animal," Officer Rodriguez said apologetically. I handed him Rex's federal certification, the real deal, with holographic seals and a federal ID number verifiable through the VA database. Rex sat at perfect attention, every inch the professional working dog he was trained to be. Officer Rodriguez examined the papers, looked at Rex in his service vest, then turned to Karen with barely concealed irritation. "Ma'am, this is a federally certified service dog. The ADA supersedes all state and local laws, including HOA regulations. There's nothing I can do here." Karen's face went from pale to tomato red in 3 seconds flat. "But there has to be something. The neighborhood rules." "No, ma'am. Federal law trumps HOA rules every time. Service dogs are untouchable." As Officer Rodriguez walked away, I caught him shaking his head and muttering about wasting taxpayer money on HOA drama. The crunch of gravel under his tires as he drove off sounded like justice being served. Karen stood on my porch, deflated but not defeated. Her eyes had that calculating look I'd seen on enemy faces in Afghanistan, the expression of someone already planning their next attack. "This isn't over," she said quietly, then stalked away, her heels clicking angry staccato beats on the concrete. That evening, neighbors Stella and Frank stopped by with a tuna casserole and moral support. Stella, still in her hospital scrubs, watched in amazement as Rex demonstrated his pressure therapy during a minor anxiety spike I hadn't even noticed building. "I've never seen anything like that," she whispered. "He reads you better than medical equipment." Frank was more focused on Karen's tactical error. 26 years fighting fires taught me one thing. When you challenge federal regulations, you always lose. Karen just declared war on the U.S. government. As they left, I stood in my doorway watching sunset paint Maplewood Drive golden. Rex sat beside me, alert but calm, scanning for threats that existed only in my memories now. Karen thought legal intimidation would work on a combat veteran. What she didn't understand was that I'd faced real enemies with real weapons and survived. A suburban tyrant with a clipboard and delusions of federal authority? This was going to be easier than I thought. When legal threats failed, Karen switched to psychological warfare. Within a week of the animal control fiasco, whispers started spreading through Maplewood like poison gas. At the grocery store, conversations stopped when I walked by. At the gas station, people avoided eye contact. Someone was spreading stories, and I knew exactly who. The campaign started subtly. Karen created a Facebook group called Maplewood Safety Watch that supposedly focused on neighborhood security. But every post seemed designed to paint me as the unstable veteran with the dangerous dog. Photos of Rex in our yard appeared with captions like, "Aggressive animal spotted near children's playground," and "Residents report feeling unsafe during evening walks." None of it was true, but truth doesn't matter in small-town gossip warfare. The smell of spray paint hit me first when I came home from physical therapy on Thursday. Someone had tagged "Psycho Vet" across my garage door in dripping red letters. My mailbox lay on its side. The post snapped clean through. Security cameras went up that weekend. Best investment I ever made. The cameras caught Karen trespassing 3 times in 2 weeks. Once at 6 a.m., photographing my trash cans from inside my property line. Once at midnight, using a flashlight to peer through Rex's dog door. And once during lunch, when she thought I was gone, measuring my fence with a tape measure like some deranged suburban surveyor. But the worst part was watching her recruit flying monkeys. Janet Wu and Robert Pierce, 2 HOA board members who'd always seemed reasonable, suddenly started echoing Karen's talking points. During a chance encounter at Home Depot, Robert actually crossed the street to avoid me. "Can't be too careful around unstable individuals," I heard him tell his wife, just loud enough for me to catch. The psychological pressure was working. My PTSD symptoms flared for the first time in months. Rex earned his kibble that week, working overtime to keep me grounded when the anxiety attacks hit. His deep pressure therapy became a daily necessity instead of an occasional tool. Then Karen made her first major mistake. She convinced the postal worker, Jim Martinez, that Rex had attacked a jogger the previous Tuesday. Never mind that we'd been at the VA hospital all Tuesday morning for my monthly appointment. Karen's story was too juicy to fact-check. But my new security cameras had captured everything. Tuesday morning footage showed Rex and me leaving for the hospital at 8:15 a.m. and not returning until 2:30 p.m. No jogger, no incident, no attack. Just Karen's imagination running wild. Better yet, the cameras caught her feeding Jim this false story on Wednesday, complete with dramatic gestures about vicious animals terrorizing innocent exercisers. Watching her perform this Oscar-worthy act of pure fiction would have been hilarious if it wasn't so damaging. I learned something valuable from my military intelligence training. When your enemy reveals their tactics, you document everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every illegal trespass. Evidence has a way of becoming useful later. Meanwhile, Stella was conducting her own covert operations. As the night nurse who knew everyone's medical business, she had access to gossip networks Karen couldn't penetrate. More importantly, she started secretly screenshotting Karen's Facebook posts before they could be deleted. "Look at this garbage," Stella said, showing me her phone during a coffee break on my porch. The latest post claimed Rex had lunged aggressively at Karen's visiting grandchildren. Funny thing is, I've lived here 3 years and never seen Karen with grandchildren. Ever. That's when the pattern became clear. Karen wasn't just spreading lies. She was creating elaborate fictional scenarios designed to build a legal case against Rex. Each story was more dramatic than the last, painting my service dog as a neighborhood menace despite zero evidence. The crunch of Frank's work boots on my driveway announced his arrival with more disturbing news. "Devin, you need to know something. Karen's been asking neighbors about your military service. Specifically, she wants to know if you ever snapped or had violent episodes." My jaw clenched. Attacking my mental health was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "There's more," Frank continued, his weathered face grim. "She's been selectively enforcing HOA rules for years. Robert Pierce has an illegal shed that's twice the allowed size. Not a peep from Karen. Janet Wu's son parks his commercial plumbing truck in their driveway every night. Clear violation of residential-only parking, but somehow only you get violation notices." The taste of injustice was bitter, like the metallic tang you get before throwing up. I remembered reading about selective enforcement during my research binge. HOA boards that pick and choose which rules to enforce lose their legal authority to enforce any rules. That night, I sat on my back porch with Rex beside me, watching stars appear over the Colorado mountains. The evening air carried the scent of someone's barbecue grill mixed with the lingering smell of Karen's rose garden fertilizer. She was escalating because her initial attacks had failed. Legal threats bounced off federal law. Animal control laughed her out of their office. Now she was trying to destroy my reputation and mental health, hoping I'd crack under pressure and leave voluntarily. Karen had made one crucial miscalculation. She assumed my PTSD made me weak and vulnerable. What she didn't understand was that combat veterans learn to function under pressure that would break most people. We don't fold, we adapt, we plan, and we strike back when the moment is right. Her moment of reckoning was coming. Karen's psychological warfare wasn't working, so she decided to go nuclear. On a crisp October morning, 2 police officers appeared at my door with expressions that told me someone had reported something serious. The older cop, Sergeant Martinez, looked embarrassed to be there. "Sir, we received a report that your dog attacked a minor yesterday afternoon. We need to ask you some questions." My blood went cold. False accusations involving children could destroy everything. My home, my service dog, my freedom. Rex sensed my spike in anxiety and immediately moved into position, pressing against my leg with that calm, steady weight that always brought me back to earth. "What exactly are you investigating?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the rage building inside. Sergeant Martinez consulted his notes. "Karen Whitmore filed a complaint stating that around 3 p.m. yesterday, your German Shepherd lunged aggressively at her 5-year-old granddaughter near the mailboxes. She has a witness, Janet Wu, who corroborates the story." The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth. Karen had crossed the ultimate line, involving a child in her fabricated drama. But something about the timeline felt off. "Officers, I need to show you something," I said, leading them to my computer where my security system stored footage. "Yesterday at 3 p.m., Rex and I were at the Veterans Administration Hospital for my monthly therapy appointment. We didn't get home until after 5. I pulled up the footage, crystal clear timestamps showing Rex and me leaving at 1:30 p.m. and returning at 5:15 p.m. No granddaughter, no incident, no attack. Just empty sidewalks and an elaborate lie crumbling in real time. Sergeant Martinez's expression shifted from investigative to annoyed. "Ma'am filed a false police report," he muttered to his partner. "That's a misdemeanor charge." But I wasn't done. "There's more, officers. My cameras caught the complainant trespassing on my property multiple times to photograph my service dog. Would you like to see that footage too?" 20 minutes later, both cops left with copies of the security footage and a very different understanding of who the real problem was in this neighborhood. The younger officer actually stopped to pet Rex, who performed his usual perfect professional behavior. "Beautiful animal," the cop said. "My brother's got PTSD from Iraq. Been thinking about getting him a service dog." After they left, I realized Karen's desperation was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. False police reports about service dogs attacking children? That was federal crime territory, not just HOA drama. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez, my VA therapist. "Heard about police visit. Can provide detailed documentation of Rex's training and medical necessity if needed. This harassment stops now." Within hours, my support network was mobilizing. Dr. Martinez sent an official letter detailing Rex's extensive training and my medical need for his services. Frank Patterson organized an impromptu neighborhood meeting at his house, where 7 families confirmed they'd never witnessed any aggressive behavior from Rex. Most importantly, Stella brought screenshots of Janet Wu privately admitting the whole story was fabricated. "Karen convinced me to say I witnessed it," Janet had texted to a mutual friend. "I feel terrible lying to police, but she said it was the only way to protect the neighborhood." The smell of Frank's garage workshop, motor oil and sawdust, filled my nostrils as neighbors gathered to compare notes about Karen's reign of terror. What emerged was a pattern of selective enforcement and harassment spanning 6 years. The Hendersons were forced to repaint their house because Karen didn't like their non-neutral beige color. The Johnsons faced 17 separate violations for fence height measured with different rulers each time. Mrs. Olivia sold at a loss after Karen cited her for excessive garden gnomes, 3 ceramic figurines in a flower bed. But here's what I learned from my intelligence training. Patterns reveal intent. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was systematically targeting homeowners until they gave up and left. Each departure meant a distressed sale that lowered property values, making houses available to her associates at below-market prices. I started connecting dots that painted an ugly picture. Karen's brother-in-law Marcus owned Premier Property Solutions, a company that specialized in buying distressed properties. Property records showed Premier had purchased 4 Maplewood homes at significant discounts over the past 3 years, all from families who'd been harassed into leaving. Veterans advocacy group lawyer Sarah Kim confirmed my suspicions when she called that evening. Devin, we've been investigating similar patterns in 3 other HOAs. It's called manufactured distress, harassment campaigns designed to force below-market sales to connected buyers. The crunch of gravel under my feet as I paced the driveway matched the grinding sound of my teeth. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was running a profitable harassment scheme disguised as HOA governance. Rex followed my agitated pacing until I finally sat on the porch steps, letting his calming presence work its magic. As my breathing steadied, my mind shifted from emotional reaction to tactical planning. Karen had just escalated from neighborhood bully to federal criminal. Filing false police reports about service dogs violated multiple statutes I'd memorized during my research obsession. Her pattern of harassment was about to become evidence in a much larger case. She'd made the classic mistake of criminals everywhere, getting greedy and overconfident. The same arrogance that made her target a combat veteran was about to become her downfall. Time to show Karen what happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight one. 3 weeks after the false police report incident, Sarah Kim called with news that changed everything. Her investigation into Karen's harassment pattern had uncovered something much bigger than petty HOA tyranny. "Devin, sit down for this," Sarah said, her voice tight with excitement. "Karen Whitmore isn't just a power-hungry board president. She's been running a sophisticated property acquisition scheme for over a decade." I was sitting in my kitchen, Rex at my feet, when Sarah dropped the bombshell that explained everything. Karen owed $47,000 in back property taxes on her pristine corner house. Her perfect lawn and immaculate landscaping, all financed with money she'd been systematically stealing from the HOA maintenance fund. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was a 12-year pattern of manufactured harassment campaigns designed to force homeowners into distressed sales. Karen would identify target properties, usually owned by vulnerable people like elderly residents, single parents, or disabled veterans, then launch coordinated attacks using fabricated HOA violations. "She's done this 17 times across 3 different HOAs, Sarah explained. Always the same pattern: relentless harassment, fabricated violations, legal intimidation, until the owners give up and sell below market value. Here's where it got criminal. Karen's brother-in-law Marcus owned Premier Property Solutions, the company that mysteriously appeared to buy these distressed properties at steep discounts. After cosmetic improvements, they'd flip the houses for massive profits. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't mask the bitter taste in my mouth as Sarah detailed the scope of their operation. Mrs. Olivia didn't sell because of garden gnome violations. She fled after Karen orchestrated a campaign involving fake noise complaints, spurious safety inspections, and anonymous letters claiming her cooking smells were disrupting neighborhood character. The Johnsons didn't leave over fence height disputes. They escaped after Karen hired people to file false insurance claims about property damage, then demanded expensive remediation that would have bankrupted them. But the most sickening revelation was how they'd targeted the Patterson family 3 years ago. Frank's elderly father had owned a corner lot worth $380,000. After 6 months of Karen's harassment, including false claims about his sprinkler system flooding neighboring properties, the old man sold to Premier for $290,000 and moved to assisted living. Frank never knew his father was scammed out of nearly $100,000. Sarah's voice carried that prosecutorial edge I'd heard from JAG officers back in the Army. "Devin, Karen targeted you specifically because veterans often have limited resources to fight extended legal battles. She assumed your PTSD would make you fold under pressure like her previous victims. The irony was delicious. Karen had picked the one target who'd actually fight back with federal law on his side. But the smoking gun that would destroy her came from an unlikely source: her own greed. Karen had been so confident in her system that she'd documented everything in emails with Marcus. Sarah's subpoena of Premier's business records revealed a treasure trove of evidence. "Listen to this," Sarah said, reading from court documents. Email dated 6 months ago. Target property at 1247 Maplewood Drive identified. Veteran homeowner, PTSD disability. Large dog presents violation opportunities. Projected acquisition timeline, 8 to 12 months. Estimated profit margin, $85,000. My hands clenched into fists. They'd calculated my suffering down to the dollar. Another email sent 3 days after my first violation notice. Subject refusing initial pressure. Escalate to legal threats and animal control. Previous experience suggests veterans crack under sustained harassment campaigns. Rex sensed my rising anger and immediately moved into position, his weight against my leg automatically triggering the calming response we'd practiced thousands of times. Even in my fury, his training worked perfectly. But the most damning evidence was Karen's insurance fraud. To fund her property tax payments and maintain her pristine house, she'd been filing false claims about HOA property damage. Sprinkler system failures, vandalism to common areas, storm damage that never happened. All carefully documented lies that netted her over $120,000 in fraudulent payouts. Sarah's investigation had connected Karen to a network of corrupt HOA board members across Colorado Springs. They shared tactics, target lists, and even referred vulnerable homeowners to each other's harassment campaigns. It was organized crime disguised as suburban governance. "The federal government takes this very seriously," Sarah continued. "Mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations under the Fair Housing Act. Karen's looking at 20 years minimum if convicted on all counts." As I hung up the phone, I sat in my kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator and Rex's steady breathing. The afternoon sun streaming through my windows felt different now. Not just warmth, but the light of justice finally penetrating Karen's web of lies. She'd spent months trying to destroy my life to steal my home. Now I held the evidence that would destroy hers instead. The hunter had become the hunted, and Karen Whitmore had no idea what was coming for her. The war room smelled like Frank Patterson's garage workshop: motor oil, coffee, and determination. On a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Sarah's bombshell revelations, my kitchen table had become mission headquarters for what Frank dubbed Operation Karen Down. Sarah Kim spread legal documents across the surface like a general planning D-Day. "We're building 3 simultaneous cases," she explained, her prosecutorial energy filling the room. "Federal civil rights violations under the ADA and Fair Housing Act, RICO conspiracy charges for the property acquisition scheme, and state-level embezzlement for the HOA fund theft." Stella Rodriguez arrived with a box of evidence that made my military intelligence heart sing. As the neighborhood's unofficial information network, she'd been documenting Karen's crimes for months without realizing their significance. Screenshots of deleted Facebook posts, recorded phone conversations where Karen coached other board members to lie, even photographs of Karen trespassing that predated my security system. "I started keeping records after she went after Mrs. Olivia," Stella said, the smell of her hospital disinfectant hand soap mixing with Frank's workshop odors. Something felt wrong about targeting a sweet old lady over garden decorations. The beauty of our strategy was its 3-pronged approach. While Sarah filed federal complaints that would trigger FBI investigation, we'd simultaneously expose Karen's financial crimes to state authorities and organize community resistance that would strip her of local power. Frank pulled up property records on his laptop, his firefighter's methodical approach perfect for tracking financial trails. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing to a spreadsheet that would make an accountant weep. "Every family Karen harassed sold within 18 months. Every property got bought by Premier Solutions at 15 to 20% below market value. Every house got flipped for massive profits within 6 months." The numbers were staggering. 17 properties over 12 years, with estimated victim losses totaling $1.2 million. Karen and Marcus had built a criminal empire by destroying families and stealing homes. Rex demonstrated his worth beyond emotional support that morning when Dr. Martinez arrived with official VA documentation. Rex performed a perfect medical alert sequence that proved his legitimate service dog status to any doubters. His training was so precise, so professional, that Sarah actually recorded it for evidence. Federal courts love visual proof, Sarah explained. When judges see Rex's actual training in action, Karen's claims about aggressive behavior become obviously false. But our secret weapon was technology Karen never saw coming. My military communications training had taught me about digital evidence preservation, so I'd been backing up everything to secure cloud storage. Every threatening email, every fabricated violation notice, every security camera file, all time-stamped and legally admissible. The crunch of gravel announced new allies arriving throughout the morning. Janet Wu appeared first, her face pale with guilt but determined to make amends. She brought printed emails where Karen had coached her exact lies for the police report. "I'm so sorry," Janet said, her voice shaking. "She convinced me you were dangerous, that lying was protecting the neighborhood. I was terrified she'd target my family next." Robert Pierce followed with his own confession and evidence. Karen had been blackmailing him with threats to expose his illegal shed unless he supported her harassment campaigns. His documentation of their conversations provided crucial evidence of Karen's intimidation tactics. But the morning's biggest surprise was Marcus himself, Karen's brother-in-law and criminal partner. Facing federal conspiracy charges, he'd flipped faster than a pancake and agreed to testify against Karen in exchange for reduced sentencing. "Greed makes people stupid," Sarah observed, reviewing Marcus's confession. He kept detailed records of every transaction, every property, every conversation. Federal prosecutors love defendants who document their own crimes. From my intelligence days, I remembered that successful operations require multiple contingencies. While Sarah handled federal charges, we organized community action that would strip Karen of her local power base. Frank coordinated a petition drive demanding new HOA elections. Stella organized neighborhood meetings to educate residents about their rights. The smell of victory was starting to overwhelm Karen's rose garden perfume that had dominated Maplewood for too long. Our timeline was aggressive but achievable. Federal complaints would trigger FBI investigation within 30 days. State embezzlement charges would freeze Karen's assets and remove her from the HOA board immediately. Community organizing would ensure new leadership that actually served homeowners instead of exploiting them. As our allies prepared to leave, I stood in my driveway with Rex, watching Karen's house across the street. Her perfect lawn looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. The fortress she'd built on lies and stolen money was about to crumble under the weight of truth and federal law. Rex nudged my hand, reminding me to stay grounded in the present moment instead of anticipating future victories. His training kept me calm, but my mind was already savoring what came next. Karen had spent months planning my destruction. Now it was my turn to return the favor, with interest compounded by federal prosecutors and criminal investigators. The hunt was almost over. Karen's world started cracking 3 days after our war room meeting, and her response was pure desperation wrapped in expensive legal letterhead. The first sign came when a private investigator started following me to VA appointments, photographing Rex and me at the grocery store, even sitting in his car outside my house taking notes like some cut-rate surveillance thriller. The PI was about as subtle as a brick through a window. Middle-aged guy in a Honda Civic, always wearing the same baseball cap, conducting covert surveillance that my military training spotted from 3 blocks away. What Karen didn't know was that my upgraded security system captured him trespassing on my property to plant a listening device near my mailbox. Amateur hour meets federal felony charges. But Karen's real desperation showed when she tried bribing Animal Control Officer Rodriguez. Stella's hospital gossip network caught wind of it first. Karen had made a $2,000 campaign contribution to Rodriguez's wife's city council race, with handwritten notes suggesting he reconsider Rex's service dog status. The taste of poetic justice was sweeter than Stella's homemade flan when Rodriguez reported the bribery attempt to his supervisor. Karen had just added attempted corruption of public officials to her growing list of federal crimes. Meanwhile, her social media campaign escalated to outright defamation. The Maplewood Safety Watch Facebook group now featured daily posts about Rex supposedly terrorizing joggers, threatening children, and displaying pack hunting behavior in our fenced backyard. Each post got more ridiculous. Yesterday's claimed Rex had organized neighborhood cats into aggressive formations. I would have laughed if it wasn't so damaging to other veterans who might face similar harassment. The smell of desperation hung around Karen like cheap perfume mixed with fear sweat. During a chance encounter at the hardware store, she actually cornered me near the paint section to make threats that sounded like bad movie dialogue. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed, clutching her purse like a weapon. "I have connections throughout this city. Your little Veteran Sympathy Act won't protect you forever." Rex sat perfectly still beside me, ignoring her theatrical performance while I recorded every word on my phone. Karen was too angry to notice the red recording light, too desperate to care about evidence. But her most dangerous escalation came when she filed a restraining order claiming I'd threatened her life during our grocery store encounter. The filing was pure fiction. Security cameras showed me deliberately avoiding her throughout the store, but restraining orders can be granted based on allegations alone. The court hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, giving Karen 5 days to spread lies about the dangerous veteran who threatened to kill his neighbor. Her whisper campaign reached fever pitch, with anonymous flyers appearing on windshields warning about PTSD violence and unhinged military personnel. Sarah Kim was ready for this escalation. "Desperate people make desperate moves," she explained while reviewing Karen's restraining order filing. "Every false allegation she makes now becomes additional evidence of harassment and defamation." The beauty of Karen's desperation was how it exposed her complete ignorance about federal law. While she focused on local harassment tactics, federal investigators were quietly building cases that would destroy her life. The FBI's white-collar crime unit had opened a RICO investigation. The IRS was auditing her tax returns going back 7 years. The Department of Veterans Affairs was pursuing federal civil rights violations. Karen was fighting a local battle while federal prosecutors loaded nuclear weapons. But the week's biggest surprise came from an unexpected source, Karen's own attorney. Thomas Morrison, a respected real estate lawyer who'd handled HOA issues for decades, withdrew from her case with a public statement that made local legal circles buzz with speculation. Due to irreconcilable differences regarding legal strategy and ethical considerations, Morrison and Associates can no longer represent Ms. Whitmore in any capacity, the statement read. Translation: even her own lawyer thought she was guilty as hell. Frank Patterson brought news of Karen's financial collapse that evening. "Bank froze all her accounts pending the embezzlement investigation," he reported, the smell of his evening cigar mixing with October's crisp air. Apparently, when they audited the HOA books, they found $73,000 missing from the emergency maintenance fund. The house of cards was falling faster than Karen could rebuild it. Rex sensed my satisfaction and reminded me to stay grounded with a gentle nudge. His training kept me focused on facts instead of emotions, which would be crucial for the legal battles ahead. That night, I stood on my back porch watching lights flicker in Karen's windows across the street. Her perfect house looked smaller somehow, less intimidating now that I knew it was built on stolen money and borrowed time. She'd escalated every conflict, burned every bridge, and made enemies of federal law enforcement. Her desperation was turning into the rope she'd hang herself with. The final confrontation was coming, and Karen had already lost. She just didn't know it yet. Karen's final gambit was so desperate it bordered on delusional. She'd partnered with a fringe anti-veteran group called American Property Rights Coalition to challenge my disability status and claim Rex was actually just an emotional support animal masquerading as a service dog. The coalition's spokesperson, a man named Bradley Hutchins who'd never served a day in uniform, held a press conference on Karen's perfectly manicured lawn. The smell of her roses mixed with the stench of his lies as he ranted about veterans gaming the system and fake service dogs threatening communities. "Devin Torres represents everything wrong with veteran entitlement programs," Hutchins declared to 3 board reporters and Karen's dwindling supporters. His so-called service dog has terrorized this peaceful neighborhood for months. Rex sat beside me on my own porch, 70 yards away, demonstrating perfect behavior while this clown defamed us both. The irony was delicious. A legitimate federal service dog being slandered by people who'd probably never seen real military training. But Karen's desperation reached new heights when she hired attorney Mitchell Graves, an ambulance chaser known for taking cases no reputable lawyer would touch. Graves filed motions claiming Rex was emotional support rather than medical service, demanding federal disability hearings that could take years to resolve. The legal strategy was pure delay tactics. Exhaust my resources with procedural warfare while Karen rebuilt her crumbling empire. What she didn't understand was that federal disability status isn't determined by local courts or desperate HOA presidents. Dr. Martinez from the VA provided documentation that demolished their entire case within 48 hours. Rex's federal certification included details about his specialized training. PTSD episode detection, panic attack interruption, crowd control assistance, nightmare response protocols. Every skill was medically prescribed and professionally verified. Mr. Torres's service dog performs life-saving medical interventions, Dr. Martinez wrote in his official response. Challenging his federal certification is equivalent to questioning a veteran's need for prosthetic limbs or cardiac medication. Meanwhile, our community organizing was succeeding beyond my wildest expectations. Frank Patterson's petition drive had collected signatures from 89% of Maplewood residents demanding new HOA elections. The smell of fresh petition ink mixed with the taste of democratic justice as neighbors who'd been silent for years finally found their voices. Stella organized neighborhood meetings that revealed the true scope of Karen's reign of terror. Stories emerged that made my harassment look mild. Elderly residents intimidated into expensive compliance modifications, single mothers driven to bankruptcy by fabricated violations, disabled homeowners forced to sell rather than face Karen's legal threats. But the week's biggest shock came when Marcus, Karen's criminal partner, was arrested at his premier Property Solutions office. Federal agents seized computers, financial records, and filing cabinets full of evidence documenting 12 years of property acquisition fraud. The crunch of handcuffs echoed through local news coverage as Marcus was led away in an orange jumpsuit. His mugshot appeared on every Denver station with headlines about HOA corruption ring and veteran harassment scheme. Karen watched her criminal empire collapse from her living room window, probably wondering when the federal agents would come for her. The answer came sooner than expected. FBI Financial Crimes Unit served search warrants on Karen's house Thursday morning while I was walking Rex past her property. The sight of federal agents carrying boxes of evidence from her Rose Garden fortress felt like Christmas morning in October. Agent Sarah Olivia, the lead investigator, actually stopped to introduce herself and examine Rex's federal certification. "Beautiful animal," she said, watching Rex demonstrate his alert behavior. "We take service dog harassment very seriously. It's a federal civil rights violation with mandatory prison time." Karen's final desperate act was calling every local news station claiming she was the victim of veteran terrorism and demanding police protection from my unstable threats. The calls backfired spectacularly when reporters discovered her criminal charges and embezzlement allegations. Channel 7's investigative team actually interviewed me and Rex, broadcasting footage of his professional medical training to contrast with Karen's lies about aggressive behavior. Watching my service dog perform perfect pressure therapy on live television, while the anchor explained federal disability law, was better than any lawyer's argument. But Karen's complete meltdown came during an emergency HOA board meeting she called to remove Devin Torres from the community permanently. Only 2 board members showed up. Janet Wu and Robert Pierce both refused to participate in what they called Karen's final fraud. The meeting, held in her living room with news cameras outside, lasted exactly 17 minutes before she started screaming about federal conspiracies and veteran privilege. Security footage from a neighbor captured her throwing violation notices at empty chairs while demanding the illegal dog be destroyed immediately. That night, Rex and I sat on our back porch watching federal surveillance teams monitor Karen's house. The autumn air carried the scent of her dying roses, fitting metaphor for her crumbling criminal empire. She'd escalated to federal crimes, alienated every ally, and declared war on the U.S. government itself. Her desperation had become the evidence that would convict her. The final confrontation was 72 hours away, and Karen Whitmore was about to face justice on a scale she'd never imagined. The Colorado Springs City Council chambers had never hosted anything like the emergency town hall meeting called for Tuesday evening, November 15th. What started as a routine HOA dispute had mushroomed into a federal criminal investigation that attracted media attention from Denver to Washington, D.C. I arrived 30 minutes early with Rex, expecting maybe 50 people. Instead, we found a line wrapped around the building, over 200 residents, plus overflow crowds gathered outside with folding chairs and thermoses of coffee. The smell of autumn air mixed with nervous energy and the anticipation of long overdue justice. Channel 7, Channel 9, and Colorado Public Radio had set up equipment inside the chambers. This wasn't just Maplewood's reckoning with Karen Whitmore. It was becoming a case study in HOA corruption that would be cited in law schools for decades. Karen arrived 10 minutes before the 7 p.m. start time, walking alone across the parking lot in a black suit that looked like funeral attire. Her usual entourage of supporters had abandoned ship, leaving her to face the music solo. Even her attorney, Mitchell Graves, had withdrawn from her case that morning with a terse statement about irreconcilable ethical differences. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her clipboard and fake authority. The woman who'd terrorized neighbors for over a decade was about to face the community she'd spent years trying to control. City Council Chairman Robert Hayes called the meeting to order, his voice echoing through chambers packed beyond capacity. "We're here to address allegations of HOA misconduct, criminal harassment, and civil rights violations that have come to the attention of federal authorities." Sarah Kim took the podium first, armed with evidence that would have made a prosecutor weep with joy. She methodically presented 12 years of documented fraud, the property acquisition scheme, embezzlement totaling $180,000, harassment campaigns targeting vulnerable homeowners, and the systematic destruction of families who dared oppose Karen's regime. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the authority of federal law, "the evidence shows a criminal conspiracy designed to steal homes through manufactured harassment. 17 families were targeted. 12 were successfully driven from their properties. Combined victim losses exceed $1.2 million. The crowd's murmur grew louder as Sarah displayed bank records showing money flowing from HOA accounts to Karen's personal expenses. Property tax documents revealed her $47,000 debt. Insurance records exposed fraudulent claims totaling $120,000. But the smoking gun was Marcus's confession, read aloud in his own words. Karen identified vulnerable targets, elderly residents, single parents, disabled veterans, then orchestrated harassment campaigns until they sold below market value. My company would purchase these distressed properties, renovate them minimally, and flip them for massive profits. The chamber erupted in angry voices as neighbors recognized their own stories in Marcus's confession. Mrs. Olivia, the elderly woman forced out over garden gnome violations, stood up with tears streaming down her face. "She stole my home," she said simply. 40 years I lived there, and she stole it with lies. When my turn came to speak, I walked to the podium with Rex at my side. The cameras focused on us, and I could hear the collective intake of breath as people saw a genuine service dog team in action. "My name is Devin Torres," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 26 years of military service, retired due to combat injuries. Rex isn't my pet. He's my prescribed medical equipment, protected under federal law. I explained how service dogs save veterans' lives, how they provide medical interventions that prevent suicide and enable disabled people to live independently. How Karen's harassment wasn't just personal cruelty, it was a federal civil rights violation that threatened my health and safety. Karen Whitmore tried to steal my home by taking away my medical support, I continued. She didn't just attack me, she attacked every disabled veteran who relies on service animals to survive. The chamber was dead silent except for the sound of cameras clicking. Then came my mic drop moment. "But here's what Karen never understood," I said, looking directly at her pale face in the 3rd row. "When you target a combat veteran, you'd better make sure you can win the war, because federal law doesn't negotiate with neighborhood bullies, and justice doesn't care about your perfectly manicured lawn." The crowd erupted in applause that lasted 3 full minutes. Rex sat perfectly still beside me, demonstrating the professional behavior that had made Karen's lies about aggressive animals look ridiculous. Karen's attempt to respond was pure desperation theater. She stood up, clutching her purse like a shield, and launched into a rambling defense that sounded like conspiracy theories mixed with martyrdom complex. "I was protecting this community from dangerous elements," she declared, her voice shaking. "Veterans with PTSD are unstable. Large dogs threaten children. Federal laws should not override neighborhood safety." The crowd's reaction was immediate and brutal. Boos, hisses, and shouts of shame echoed through the chambers until Chairman Hayes called for order. But Karen wasn't finished digging her own grave. "This is all federal overreach and veteran privilege," she continued, apparently unaware that she was confessing to civil rights violations on live television. "HOAs should have the right to exclude dangerous people and animals." Sarah Kim was frantically taking notes. Karen was providing additional evidence for federal prosecutors with every word. The evening's final act came when FBI agent Sarah Olivia stepped forward to address the crowd. Her presence had been kept secret until this moment, adding dramatic weight to the proceedings. "Ms. Whitmore is under federal investigation for conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, civil rights violations, and embezzlement," Agent Olivia announced. "Federal warrants have been issued. Arrests are imminent. The chamber fell silent as the weight of federal justice settled over Karen's crumbling empire. As people filed out, dozens stopped to thank me and pet Rex, who performed his usual perfect public behavior. Veterans introduced themselves, sharing their own stories of PTSD and service dogs. Children asked their parents why anyone would try to hurt a helper dog. Karen sat alone in the third row long after the cameras left, staring at the empty podium where her reign of terror had finally ended. Justice had arrived in Colorado Springs, and it was wearing a federal badge. 6 months later, I stood in the same city council chambers watching Karen Whitmore get sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The woman who'd terrorized Maplewood Estates for over a decade sat in an orange jumpsuit, finally stripped of the fake authority she'd wielded like a weapon for so long. Judge Patricia Hernandez didn't mince words during sentencing. Ms. Whitmore, your systematic harassment of disabled veterans constitutes some of the most egregious civil rights violations this court has seen. Your criminal enterprise destroyed families and communities for personal profit. Karen's final words to the court were as delusional as her entire defense. I was protecting property values. Even facing federal prison, she couldn't comprehend that terrorizing disabled veterans wasn't a legitimate business strategy. Marcus received 18 months for conspiracy and agreed to testify against other HOA corruption rings across Colorado. His cooperation helped federal prosecutors build cases against corrupt board members in 12 different communities. Karen's criminal network was bigger than anyone imagined. The financial restitution was swift and brutal. Karen owed $240,000 to the HOA fund, victim compensation, and legal costs. Her corner house with the perfect lawn went into foreclosure within 30 days. Premier Property Solutions was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay victims. Mrs. Olivia received $95,000 in restitution, enough to buy back into Maplewood if she chose. The Johnsons got $78,000 for their harassment-induced losses. Frank Patterson's elderly father's estate received $112,000, the largest individual settlement. But the real transformation happened in our community itself. The new HOA board, elected unanimously after Karen's arrest, included Stella Rodriguez as president and Frank Patterson as vice president. Their first official act was passing bylaws specifically protecting service animals and disabled residents from harassment. The second act was even better, establishing the Rex Rodriguez Memorial Service Dog Training Facility on the vacant lot where Karen's foreclosed house once stood. The facility, funded by federal victim restitution money, trains service dogs for disabled veterans throughout Colorado. Rex became the facility's poster dog, literally. His photograph hangs in the lobby with a plaque reading, "Federal law protects service animals and the veterans who need them." Watching him help train other service dogs has been more healing for my PTSD than years of therapy. The ripple effects spread far beyond Maplewood. Colorado passed the Service Dog Protection Act, inspired by our case, making harassment of service animals a state felony with mandatory jail time. The law includes provisions I suggested: automatic civil rights investigations for any HOA targeting disabled residents, and criminal penalties for filing false reports about service animals. National veterans organizations use our case as a training example for fighting HOA discrimination. The Department of Veterans Affairs added new procedures for reporting housing harassment. The Department of Justice increased enforcement of service dog protections nationwide, but the personal healing has been the most rewarding part. My PTSD symptoms improved dramatically once the harassment ended. Dr. Martinez attributes it to community support and successful advocacy. Fighting for justice actually helped me process my own trauma. Rex earned his retirement from constant medical duty, though he still performs pressure therapy when anxiety spikes. Stella and Frank became lifelong friends and advocates. We meet every Saturday morning for coffee and neighborhood planning, turning our kitchen table war room into a permanent fixture. The smell of Stella's homemade pastries has replaced the stench of Karen's desperation that once poisoned our community. The Maplewood Safety Watch Facebook group still exists, but now it actually promotes community safety instead of harassment campaigns. Posts feature legitimate neighborhood news, service dog education, and resources for disabled residents. Property values increased 15% after Karen's removal. Turns out criminal HOA presidents hurt home prices more than disabled veterans with service dogs. Who knew? I started a nonprofit called Rex's Fund that provides legal support for veterans facing HOA discrimination. We've handled 47 cases in 2 years, with a 100% success rate. Federal law is pretty clear when you know how to use it. and most HOA bullies fold faster than lawn chairs when federal prosecutors start asking questions. The annual Bark in the Park fundraiser has become Maplewood's biggest community event. Last year, we raised $85,000 for disabled veteran services while celebrating the service dogs who save lives every day. Rex judges the Best Service Dog Demonstration category, which always ends with him getting treats from dozens of grateful families. But the moment that made everything worthwhile came during this year's Memorial Day parade. Rex and I marched with the Disabled American Veterans contingent when a little girl broke away from her family to run up and hug him. "Thank you for protecting my daddy," she whispered into Rex's fur. Her father, a young veteran with his own service dog, stood nearby with tears in his eyes. That's when I knew we'd won something bigger than a legal case. We'd changed how communities think about disabled veterans and the service animals who save our lives. As I write this, Rex is lying beside my desk, alert but relaxed, ready to work if needed, but content to simply be my companion. The evening sun streams through windows that overlook our community garden, planted where Karen's House of Lies once stood. If you're dealing with HOA harassment, know that you're not alone. Federal law protects disabled residents and service animals from discrimination, regardless of what some clipboard-wielding tyrant claims. Document everything, contact veterans advocacy groups, and remember that justice sometimes takes time, but always arrives eventually. Share your HOA nightmare story in the comments. Let's build a community that stands up to bullies and protects the vulnerable. And subscribe for more underdog victory stories that prove justice wins when good people fight back. Remember, bullies count on victims staying silent and isolated. But when communities unite behind federal law and basic human decency, even the most powerful neighborhood tyrants discover they're not so powerful after all. Rex and I are living proof that sometimes the good guys really do win.